Hi, this is Mary from the Rebuilding Faith online community. I joined the community because I have followed Jeremy when he was a teaching pastor, then continuing on when he was lead pastor in Portland. The best part of my experience in the community has been being able to ask questions that are asked of me that I don't have an answer for, and being able to get different perspectives.
Welcome to another episode of Cabernet and Pray, where we sip the wine and we stir the faith. And today we've got a friend of mine who I'm reconnecting with, and we figure out when the last time we actually were in person. He helps me figure this out in the episode. This is Gavin Linderman on today's episode. He is a pastor, practitioner, and community builder, an all-around creative guy, as you're going to see in this episode. Gavin serves as the lead pastor of Axiom Church in Peoria, Arizona. He's an executive director of discernment and movement for the Surge Network, which is a collaborative movement of churches across the city. Beyond the pulpit, Gavin is the founder of Banquet, a creative ecosystem that weaves together art, business, and hospitality as expressions of the kingdom. He has helped launch neighborhood spaces, restaurants, and initiatives that embody a faith rooted not in performance, but in presence. At the heart of all of his work is a simple conviction that Jesus is already here, moving quietly in the cracks and corners of our lives. Gavin and his wife, Kendall, are raising their family in Peoria. And this was a delightful conversation that went all over the place and had a fun little twist at the end where we added in some things that we hadn't talked about publicly before, but we threw them in and gave a few shout outs as well. So this is episode 60, Between the Pulpit and the Pub.
I've never shared this with anybody publicly.
If this was SportsCenter, that would be like such a hot take. Skip Bayless would have no idea. Stephen A. Smith would have no idea what to say if you drop that down. That is so good.
The joke I always say is like, how'd you learn so much? You gotta drink a lot.
The power of food and beverage to lubricate an environment.
Resistance to change is hurting the church.
I'm not in the camp that God has a penis or a vagina or a body at all. I'm in the camp that God is a universal spirit.
This is the strangest podcast that I have been on. I don't even know what to do.
I'm kind of geeked up about this wine.
So this is my second glass, and it delivers a little more of a punch than I expected. So if I get a little loopy, it's your fault. You told me to drink on this show.
I will also say as a confession, I am a lightweight. So I've had like 3 sips of this wine and I'm already feeling it. So this is fun.
You've uncovered the mystery. You've exposed the formula.
You've just duct taped together a number of things that aren't normally hanging out together, and I'm here for it.
We're going to sit down at a table. We're going to have a glass of wine and some food, and we're going to talk about the beauty of Jesus.
Thanks for what you're doing with this podcast and for the creative way you're doing it and the beautiful, positive spirit in which you're doing it.
I really appreciate this venue, what you're doing. It is fun, and yet you dig into the deep stuff.
I've heard about your podcast for a long time, and I love that you're a pastor and that you explore the world of faith through wine. That's very unique.
I never thought of church history in terms of wine drinkers. I love this question. Really got my mind rolling.
You had me with herbaceous notes, I want you to know. I'm ready to just stay here and live in the wine tour.
I will never forget the first time I bought a bottle of wine by myself, which was yesterday.
If you're familiar with drunk history, I thought it's like drunk theology. So I
got a little spicy there. It's the peach wine.
Apparently the wine is, here we are. Queer we are. Beer we are. No, it's wine, Jeremy. By the way, drinking this Pinot Grigio at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is making me even more direct in my communication than I normally would be.
I know why you have your guests drink wine. It makes sense now. Yeah, I get it. A little bit of liquid courage to really unleash the beast.
I think you've got a good podcast. So throwing the wine bit in there, that's nice, doesn't it? Cabernet and Pray, yeah. Well, I am joined today by a man of many talents, and hopefully we get to explore a number of them. Welcome to the podcast, Gavin Linderman.
Hey, thank you so much. Pumped to be on this one in particular. Guys that host podcasts usually have a hit list of people they want to talk to. I'm the opposite. I have a hit list of podcast hosts that I hope will hit me up one day. And so when I got the email or the message, I was like, raised a glass right there and gave thanks to the Lord and said, I have arrived. Somebody once told me, you don't ask to be on people's stuff. You don't ask to go speak at things. You wait to be invited. So yeah, thank you for bringing me into the web, the universe of podcasting.
Well, you've arrived then. So we're gonna do it right today, and we're gonna start with drinking some great wine, which is what makes this podcast better than every other podcast out there that doesn't have wine. But if they do have wine, then maybe they're better. But we're going to talk about what we're drinking. I am drinking an absolute beauty today. I've got a 2018 Tre Leone Whitehall Lane. It's a red wine blend, Gavin, from Napa Valley. And I looked it up. Tre Leone translates to 3 lions and represents the 3 generations of the Leonardini family who created this wine. So you got 3 generation winemakers there, which I think is pretty cool. It's a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah, and Zinfandel. And this thing, for those who are listening only on audio, this thing is dark. And I was pouring it, and I'm like, oh, man, this thing is super dark. And it's got a beautiful peppery note with some, like, bell pepper notes. But it is balanced. It is smooth. And I'm excited to enjoy this during our conversation today. So that's what I'm drinking. What do you got in your glass, Gavin?
All right, man. That's a good question. I'm still figuring that out. And again, I just full confess here, man, wine is not my staple, and which is really pathetic considering that I own an establishment that serves alcohol. But it is Sauvignon Blanc, and it likes to brag about having grass notes and fruit, which to me does not pull me in. But you guys, the audience, can be it's aromas of intense fruit and cut grass.
Yep, that's a trademark Sauvignon Blanc note right there.
Okay, so bursts of passion fruit, citrus. Yep, exceptional vintage from New Zealand, from the Marlborough region.
That's my fave right there. You're drinking one of my top 5 favorite wines from my favorite places.
So I've described it. Can you name it? That's the question there. Or maybe I can give you like a price range on what I paid for it. You'd be able to figure it out. Of course, this isn't a wine quiz, but it could.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of Sauvignon Blancs from New Zealand. It's not a niche market there.
That's fair. It's like, hey, which brewery in the United States, am I talking about? This is the Kim Crawford. My wife picked it up. It was I think $20.
Kim Crawford is solid.
Okay. Hey, well, thanks for that affirmation, man. Actually, I need to taste it. So let's try it out. A little sweeter than I was anticipating. And again, I'm not a wine guy. It's been a long time since wine, but it has me. It's got me salivating.
So that's actually the acidity is what you're sensing, because Sauvignon Blancs are really high acidity, which I like. I like that feeling of the salivating, like, wow, that racing acid, on the back of your palate. But yeah, that's what you're noting. And it's a dry wine, so the sweetness you're picking up is the citrus notes.
Okay. So just hearing that makes me like it a little bit more. So I want you to know you're doing a good job. And then I was thinking, I think you're supposed to eat something with wine typically. I don't know the rules. So cheese and crackers are before me as well. So
wow. You might be the first guest to bring a snack along too.
Yeah. And it's I hope that's okay if you just hear me munching along as we go here. So like, this guy's got no manners. He's got a Big Mac and a Kim Crawford bottle of wine,
Well, there you go, dear listeners. If you hear chewing sounds, that is Gavin. That's on Gavin's side of the microphone.
Yeah, way to go.
Well, Gavin, we have connected online for a while. I think we did meet in person years ago. I was trying to recall where, and I couldn't remember, but maybe you have a memory. I couldn't place it, but we live in the same state, so it's nice to have a fellow Arizonian on the pod with me today. I want to start off with a question. You've listened to the podcast. You probably know this question is coming, But the question I love for people to get a feeling for a little bit of your story, a little bit of your journey, and the idea that our faith is always a work in progress. But if you look at the last 10 years of your journey with God, how would you say that your faith has changed in that time?
Yeah. Yes, good question. And real quick, I'll just name that we did have lunch at a Habit Burger on a time.
Okay, tell me about this, because I don't remember this.
I think you had just written a book on pleasure. Is that right?
Okay, so that would have been like 2015.
Okay, yeah. And I had just read it, and somebody was telling me that you were like going soft Anabaptist or something, and I was like, I need to connect with anything remotely Anabaptist in the Valley, because I just didn't have it. And all the folks I was connecting with at the time were kind of in the missional front, and they weren't Anabaptist. They were sadly Reformed, or not sadly, but you know what I mean. It was a tough leap.
Little Freudian slip there.
Yeah. Forget. And so I was pretty ready for a cool glass of water. And so connecting with you and just knowing that, hey, at least there's one other guy in town. I think you had a little bit more braveness to where you were at the time than probably I did. But I mean, I was planting a Mennonite church, but I was stoked to hang with you and, learned that you knew some of the same people I knew, but we have not hung out since, which I think you moved away for a little bit, or?
I did. I went to Oregon.
Okay, so I just wrote you off when you went to Oregon, man. I felt
I ceased to exist in your mind. Yes.
Yeah. It was
well, I'm trying to offer, repair to that relationship now. It's 5 years. I've been back for 5 years. I feel like it was time for us to re-engage.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we are. And yeah, to answer the question on how has my faith, is it changed in the last 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In some regards, it's just, I would say, been refined. I think 10 years ago, I had a bunch of ideas, but they weren't embodied yet. And so I was a really hungry, zealous, young Anabaptist, classic guy ripping down the flag at the church I worked at. And as I stepped out on my own and committed to being a learner, every year since, I've submitted myself into spaces that have just really shaped me. And so I would say today, I feel like I sit in a seat that is well-traveled and not just idealism. That sounds a bit arrogant, but that's the mark. I've been a practitioner for 10 years, and I've left the space of sort of debating, figuring out what is it that I believe. I moved from there to what is it that I want to do? And honestly, I moved on from there to who is it that I'm becoming? And that sort of journey from what do I believe, what do I do, who am I becoming, has now led me to a new paradigm, which might be more important than all three of the ones that came before it. And that is just that, who am I with? It's just the relationship. And so today what I have is a deep sense of a relationship that's pretty tangible with God. It's embodied, and it's no longer just in my head. And so that's the best answer I think I can give you. So, and I don't owe that to my own efforts. I owe it to a cloud of witnesses that have just loved me well. So.
Now, when you say 10 years ago, you made a shift from being a practitioner, was that, I don't know, I'm trying how to say this. Was that because you were getting into Anabaptist then, and that was really an entry point, or because that was a shift in the way you were experiencing Anabaptist theology?
Yeah, it was a shift into being a practitioner. So I was tired of just preaching and talking about it. I wanted to practice it and start to put vehicles together that I could express this in. And so it's been more of just a shift in like my focus. It has been more on the apostolic than the prophetic, if that makes sense. I want to live it out. I want to embody it. And I don't want to just be deeply convicted by it and online shouting about it. Although I do some of that also. But that's only been even recently that I've been more vocal online, and came through the encouragement of some friends, some time with my spiritual director, some other internal shifts that were going on in me. And so yeah, I just at the end of the day, like if somebody showed up, I wanted them to go, this crew's living it out. We're not just talking about it. And it's kind of that straightforward. Obviously, there's been shifts in what I believe in. There's been, internal movements that have taken place. I'm way less interested in picking who's in or who's out anymore. I don't think we have the luxury today to do that. If we're leaders in the church of any variety and we're sitting there worried about which way you lean or what you think about this issue, those have some value, but not at the cost of our witness and our capacity to break bread together. And that's where I bring it down to, is like, if we could sit down and have a meal, we're going to be okay. And that goes for other Christians and for non-believers. The challenge is, I hang with a lot of followers of Jesus that aren't willing to break bread with non-believers always. And so I think that's problematic.
So I'm curious, you say you've been more vocal online lately. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, a little bit of fear and trembling. And here's why. This is going to pull up my Mennonite convictions now. I am deeply suspicious of online of tech, of putting myself in platforms where I don't know the audience. And so I will never do a podcast unless I have a relationship with the host. I won't go speak at a conference if I don't know the people that are either going to be there or they brought me out. Because I think there's something really inherently dangerous about sort of voices just out there in the, going, and we're being so influenced by it. And I picked that up as a pastor of a local church. But what I've learned over the last 5 years is that my very local church has 100 other pastors now. It's just that they're pastors that they've never met. And it's created a lot of havoc and danger. So what we've moved to is to say, hey, that's okay, but instead of listening to those voices alone, do it in community. So pick a voice, get a small group, listen to it together, and the next week somebody else in the group can share their person. And now you can test it against the community hermeneutic, which is a Mennonite principle. So for me to have a voice online has been a cautious endeavor from a posture of a lot of people that I really respect saying, Gavin, some of the things that you're communicating and naming right now are no longer just for you. There was a season where it was just for you, and it was wise to keep it here. But we want you to feel permission to share it elsewhere. That's why I've never written a book until just now. I'm writing one as we speak, and for the same reason. So yeah, it just felt like the shift. And there was a spiritual moment too. Like I was on Sabbath, and I tried reading, and I couldn't get anything else in. And all of a sudden, I just felt this conviction to get it all out. And so I put down all the books and resources, and I spent my sabbatical writing essentially the book that I'm now editing. And so, yeah, just sometimes God unlocks something for you.
That's cool. I know you're early in the process, or probably early in talking about it. Are we able to get a little preview of what the book's about, or is it still hush hush while it's under wraps?
Yeah, I don't have any rules for this. I don't know anything about writing books. I don't have a publisher. I have a number of publishers that have asked for it. And so I don't know what'll happen with that, though. I just don't know the process. But yeah, the book's called Silent Light, and it's about tending to the flame that's always been there. And my hope is that people will sort of get themselves out of the hype and back into a hopeful place. And so it deals with issues from, it's a book about presence over platform, radiance over spotlight, disciple over influencer, all those type of dynamics. But it also deals with paradigm shifts into what I would call a relational spirituality over and above other forms of spirituality. And then it unpacks practicum, like what's the shape and form. And so I worked closely with this idea of the transcendentals, truth, goodness, and beauty being the universal language of God, that anybody, Christian or not, can engage. So what does it look like now to prop up the artists, the shepherds, and the builders, the entrepreneurs who steward those transcendentals? And can we create communities that are convergences of those spaces that pull us outside of the local church and into the city again? And so it covers a handful of things, but that's all coming out of, again, the last 10, 15 years of just really practicing and troubleshooting the marketplace, the local church, intentional, all the different components that can become a table for communion. So,
love it. So you're the pastor of a church called Axiom, and this is rooted in the Anabaptist tradition, and that is, as we've talked about, what initially drew us together. I was early into Anabaptist, as I don't know if you were early into it at that point, but that was definitely earlier in my journey. This is a beautiful tradition and a theology that I don't think enough people know about, and so we get to talk to someone who is on the front lines of shepherding a community in this tradition. I'd love to hear from you. What is it you love about Anabaptist theology? And again, with the insight that this might be a new framework for a lot of listeners.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a number of things that I really love about it, but the first thing I'll say is that my experience of it as a young guy coming out of being on tour as a musician, I was really baptized into a community in the literal baptism sense, but in the welcoming into the presence of God the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And they modeled a community dynamic that wasn't just accountability to my sins, it was seeing me through to my best self. And I recognized really quickly that there was something different about this church experience than the sort of NASCAR experiences I'd had before. And as I started to ask questions, and they began to teach me the gospel of the kingdom of God, which was inherent to the Anabaptist theology, and they taught me about community and how their hermeneutics were different, I just recognized that there was something really sincerely good here that was probably, at minimum, it's what this sort of cultural season needed. But at best, it might actually help us reshape the Western faith expression in a direction that's less power over and is less caught in the demonic. I'll just say the culture wars. So those are just some features. There's a pendulum within the Anabaptist community from more fundamentalist to more neo-Anabaptist expressions. I'm probably more in the neo-Anabaptist. The Amish don't really know what to do with guys like you and me, but there are great things in the Amish tradition. But even the Christocentric view is important for me too. That not only do I see all of Scripture through Christ, but I give him more weight. And the reason I do that is because he has the interpretive authority and he also has the written authority. And so if he is willing to earmark things and say, you've heard it said, but I tell you, well, that's power. And that's a power that goes beyond witness of the Scripture on its own, which is a special revelation, to the embodied revelation of Jesus himself. And so that probably requires a lot more. And I know you've gone down that road before, but So that was really important for me, that Jesus actually was not just the common ground, but he was the foundation. And so that's the only way we can get deep and wide at the same time, is with something that secure. It's actually a lot harder to mess with Jesus than with the scriptures, although I know people do. We like to edit all over the place, don't we? So that wasn't
Now,
like
in
a
your
great explanation of Anabaptism, by the way.
No,
I gave you no history.
It's what stands out to you, which is, again, I think it's a lived experience. I'm curious because you don't have a particular expression in the name. So, your church is Axiom. It's not Axiom Mennonite or Axiom Friends or, the Quakers of Axiom, right? So you've kind of distanced it that, but obviously I'm imagining people figure out the Anabaptist part of it pretty early on. What have been the reactions to people, because I'm imagining some are looking for an Anabaptist and others probably don't know what that is, but found out about your church. How have you navigated that, or what is that like for the typical person when they discover this theology?
Yeah, the vast majority of people that come to Axiom in the various ways that they get there and arrive are not Anabaptists, nor have they ever heard of it, but they are drawn to what's taking place there, which I think speaks to the name Axiom. And I'll just say that real quick. We called it that because the word means self-evident. And it was our weekly commission to our church to not let the buildings do it for us, not let the signage or the name. And so I want people to go live it out. And, but yeah, pretty quickly they recognize that, this community's hermeneutic and their way of being together, their emphasis of relationship, their commitment covenantally to one another, their posture on peace, and their obsession with the Sermon on the Mount. Like a Sermon on the Mount, if you go to like a church 101, you're essentially, I'm going to hand you the Sermon on the Mount. And that's the whole thing. And then when we go to discipleship, it's like, okay, where do we go from there? Okay, into the Gospels, and then from the Gospels into the New Testament, from the New Testament into the whole of Scripture. And I want people to get into it all. But in traditional paradigms, you start in Genesis as a kid in Sunday school, and you work your way up. And we start with the sermon, like the teachings of Jesus, and we move out there. Otherwise, the rest of Scripture doesn't get formed by the words of Jesus. They get formed, in a more linear sense. So by starting our catechism with Christ's words and then moving out, now as we get into the Old Testament where we read it, we have the new covenant in mind. And so yeah, they find out we're Anabaptist pretty quick. We use that language on Sundays, Anabaptism. They know that we're Mennonite Brethren, which Mennonite Brethren is unique. It's like kind of, people joke MB means mostly Baptist. If you were to go to a lot of, Mennonite Brethren churches, you'd feel like you're just in another evangelical church, and that's great. Our expression of Anabaptism is what we would say equally evangelical as we are Anabaptists, which killed us on both ends, by the way, the last 10 years, because for the conservatives, they hated the Anabaptist side of it, and for the more liberal side, they hated the evangelical side of it. And I was just like, I don't know what to tell you. This is kind of our heritage of what we are.
Yeah, if you're pissing everybody off, you're probably doing something well.
Yeah, hopefully that idea rings out. So, but yeah, so people will come and then they'll go, wait, hold on, what is that? And then all of a sudden they got a list of questions about what we believe in. And then I confuse them even more, because I'll say, well, if you want to know what we believe in, you're going to have to go ask the church. Because the truth is that we are a body, and we're all over the map on these issues that you're asking about. And so while the leadership might hold to this ideal and are inviting people towards it, the truth is that the church itself actually believes in different things. So if so that then just, can throw a wrench in the whole thing as well for people that are just discovering it. Others are like, hey, that sounds cool, sign me up, but most people, especially when it comes to the issue of war and nonviolence, it's a really difficult idea for people to get behind fully. They can kind of say that looks nice and sounds nice, but we don't know that that actually plays out in the fallen world. I understand that. But, it's a good critique. We're certainly terrible at it. The peace thing, we're not great at it.
Yeah, for those listening, if you don't know, the commitment to nonviolence is a pretty big pillar of Anabaptist theology and tradition. So that is one that if you're coming to it and you don't understand that piece, it's like, oh, this is unique. This is different.
Yeah. And
it's not very evangelical these days, Gavin.
No, I know it's not. And I don't want to hold it dogmatically, and so it's like, how do you hold this posture with integrity and well without, using doctrine to force it upon other people? And so we do have people in our church that wouldn't consider themselves all the way there. And so I try to talk more about peacemaking than pacifism, simply because, not because I'm trying to dodge that, but I'm concerned that pacifism is just too political of a term. And Jesus himself speaks in language like peacemaking. And so if we can train everybody to be a peacemaker, whether they agree with nonviolence or not at the end of the day, I feel like we're moving in the right direction.
That's good. On your church page, you have a couple sentences that I thought were good. You say, we recognize that the church often struggled to love people that weren't like them, but we desire to change that narrative by practicing rhythms of formation, mission, and celebration. We use the word pioneer to summarize this work because Jesus is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, Hebrews 12. How do you see this invitation for Christians to be pioneers in culture without just diving into the culture wars like has become so common for that's what it looks like?
Yeah. So I think I'm hearing two different questions in your question. So let me ask, are you because I've heard people make the assertion the pioneer language is very imperialistic and colonialistic, right? And so it automatically triggers some people, that language, and it puts us right front and center with the culture wars. Is that what you mean? Is that what you're referring to? Or do you mean just in general? No, how do you challenge people to go out in the pioneer in the sense of the term we're using it?
Yes, and because I think I think depending on where you start, you read that word pioneer very differently. So if I'm mainstream evangelical, not Anabaptist, and I read that, I think we're going to go battle the culture. We're going to win these culture wars. We're going to go be pioneers, take new ground. Because I know that's not what you mean by it, right?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what do you actually envision, and how do you help people understand this image differently than they might understand it if just left to their own to read it?
Yep. So the reason why it says formation, mission, and then celebration is pioneer effort starts inside of ourselves. And what most followers of Jesus get to, and this is why your opening question is so good, what's happened in the last 10 years? Because most people on their journey don't have reflective muscles. They're just in the space they're in, and they're blazing forward. And what we're doing is we're saying, as a follower of Jesus, that's a part of this community, we have to develop self-awareness, reflective capacity, and meet the Spirit where the Spirit is at in us, which usually means focusing on areas of resistance and places that you don't want to go. And it's going to require a pioneer spirit to go into uncharted territory. And so we use spiritual directors to accompany new to faith or mature in faith if they're ready to sort of explore the interior and allow Jesus to get, he already has access to it, but he's patiently waiting for us to meet him there. And then the work begins. And so we start there. If we can claim some ground, if you will, in the interior life, then we begin to have liberties in our places of loving neighbor. I can't love neighbor well if I haven't first experienced the love of God, and I would honestly maybe even say your ability to love yourself. And most of the people out there loving their neighbor don't love themselves, and I think that carries a lot of problems. So we want the outward focus to follow the inward work, and then celebration, that third tier, is really less about pioneering at that juncture and more about the peace that we have in the world with our enemies, with non-believers, with other Christians alike, that there's freedom at the banquet table now, right? Where Jesus says, hey, go out into the streets, invite everybody. Nobody's got a problem with that. Now, they did in the parable, but that was his thing he was challenging us with. And so true transformation ultimately leads to the freedom to celebrate and to enjoy heaven. And so that's, I don't know if I'm answering it well, but that's kind of, that's the short version of the class.
Like it.
And pioneering too carries the note, like, we have always been creatives, and as a discipline and a rule of life, and we think there's something about not copying but creating that puts us in proximity, not just with Jesus but with others, and that's important spiritual work. And so it's not like we're just trying to not do what mom and dad's church did. We've got better church history than that. But I want to carry a virtue or value of creativity in all the work that we're doing, because I think that's what's one of the best tools God gives us to unlock the doors, if you will, or to change our paradigms, or to continue to renew our mind, is through creative expression.
So that's a great segue here, because so much of the other stuff that you do just reeks of creativity. And it's funny to like from afar to study, what you're doing, because in one sense, the Anabaptist is very much tied to a history and to, a tradition, and not necessarily the most creative, right? Is not a word that typically goes with Anabaptist. But then you're merging that with all these other creative pursuits of how you live these ideas out, which I think is what's really intriguing. One of the things you created is something called Banquet, where the marketplace and kingdom share a meal. Which, come on now, we're talking Cabernet and Pray here.
Yeah,
and then you have this line, ladies and gentlemen, I found this line on the website that I poured out a glass for you and cheersed you all by myself. You say this: our mission field lives in the space between the pulpit and the pub. That is, come on now, that's some good stuff. Let's talk about that. What is this mission field that you're talking about right there?
Yeah, dude. Well, you already know it, man, and you're the forerunner, dude, and guys like you. It's not good news if it's not happening in the bar, and if it doesn't reach there, if we can't have a beer or a glass of wine with the best of the world, we've lost. We've completely lost, because what we've said is that we will only go as far as we're comfortable. And for people that are actually empowered with the ministry of the Spirit, that's not good enough. And so for me, I've just said, hey, this is just a mantra that we live by. The domain that Jesus invites us to is in both spectrums. And again, I want that to not just be ideological; it needs to be practiced. And so when we came to that, our shared conviction was we were going to build a bar, and that's what we did. We opened up a bar in Glendale, and every night people are there hosting each other, drinking, hanging out, and we treat it like a monastery. Like the hope and prayer is that we have somebody there at all times that is just obsessed with Jesus and enjoys to live life with the best of them. And so, yeah, we just want to live it out. And I write about this in the book. And what we found is that what happens at the bars, we've flipped the script. We have more people coming now to our church through the bar and through the coffee shop and through the chicken restaurant, through the different projects we have than other sources, because we've set the table. And that's why the word's banquet. It's like, hey, a living room for every neighborhood. That's what we're talking about. Whether it's a pub or a winery or a venue, or it could be a library program, but it could be a library. But it's just about setting tables and empowering mission. And yeah, just like, I feel like this is kind of what you've done with the community wine events. I mean, honestly, more directly, more boldly, because you have explicitly gone and said, hey, we're going to have a talk about the intersection of faith and whatever. I can't remember what your next one's on. You have one coming up, right?
Yeah. And we're rethinking the Bible. And what I've started doing with those events is basically the things that, like, what are the conversations you want to have that you wish every church would have, and they don't often happen? And, it's kind of experimenting with how far can you push that, how far can you have these kind of conversations? Because as you've seen, there's a completely different reaction you get when someone walks into a physical church building, regardless of what the words we use, right? Something clicks in their mind. I'm in a sacred space. There's certain expectations of me, things that I'm supposed to do, supposed to say, supposed to not say. You don't have those things in a bar. So when people walk into a bar, their guard is lower. And if you get a good beverage in them, they're relaxed, they're more open, and you have a different kind of conversation. And so I have seen people share some of the most honest, vulnerable, like, I can't believe you just said that out loud to a room of strangers type stuff in a bar, not in a church, And again, I've had some cool moments in church, but like the stuff that has wowed me has been in the bar because, it's like what we're talking about. There's just a difference in that space. And so, I'm at a point now where I'm like, how far can you push this model? How much can you talk about Jesus, and how transformative can that experience be when you unabashedly, like, this isn't a church. We're not creating a church. We're having a conversation that's meaningful about things that a church would also talk about, but we're going to do it in a bar.
Yeah.
And dude, I have just been blown away by the reactions we get.
Yeah. So Jeremy, like, there are certain things you can talk about in the church about Jesus, but there are certain things you can't.
Oh yeah.
And in a bar, I can talk about any damn thing I want to about Jesus. And not only do I have listeners, I have engagers. They want to dialogue. And so we actually have kind of done an inverse thing where we said, let's treat the church more like a speakeasy, where it's like hidden and hard to find. And people kind of wander in and go, what is this? And we, steward the mystery, if you will. And then treat the bar more like you would on Sundays. So I don't have greeters out in front of my bar, although sometimes the security guard's out there. But we're
The
thinking
bouncer.
in that, the bouncer. We're thinking in that paradigm as we think about how to do this well, and we're not getting it perfect. That's for sure. But I need the context to practice this out in, and that's why we launched that. And now we're trying to help others. So it used to be that people would come to our coffee shop and go, how do you do this? Well, we want this for our church. And then they would take the coffee shop model and really ruin it over there at their church. I hate to say that, but they would turn it into a Christian bookstore with, really bad coffee. And we said, no. We did a for-profit coffee shop that's winning awards, and it's not owned by the church, as a screen door, if you will. And now the church is just taking it. So now I've got pastors coming to me and going, how do we do the bar? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to tell them, like, I don't want this to be the new Christian thing, like, I can't go to a coffee shop without hearing pastors talking in a room, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm getting too concerned here, but that's something I'm thinking about right now. So.
What a fascinating problem to have.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Like, this bar is getting too successful. There's too many people trying to experience God this way. We gotta be careful about this. Okay, so it's not owned by the church. How is that set up? Because I imagine you have people in the church having questions about how is all this affiliated or what's connected and
Yeah, and so it might feel tricky. Something I like, the language I'm using to kind of describe this is, and my hope was that you couldn't really tell where the church ended and the world began and vice versa. I wanted to blur the lines a lot intentionally, and not so that there wasn't clarity for people that were afraid or confused, but so that the people in the church stumbled into places that the lights need to be turned back on. And so when you map this out, it's not like the church was like, hey, we as a 501c3 want to go own and purchase a pub and this and that. Although you can do that. And there are churches that own for-profit businesses under their 501c3. I've never done that. It actually makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Our model has been to partner with practitioners in the field that want to go through our training, which is really like we train guys to be spiritual directors. We put them through a 3-year cohort on spiritual formation. We do all the leadership stuff. I fly them out to hang out with Hugh Halter and others like this to get practice. And we treat all of our leaders, whether it's leaders in the church or leaders in the pub or leaders in wherever, we give all of them those opportunities. And so comes, let's say you came to me and said, I want to start a winery or a tasting room. And, you'd probably be more qualified for more than one reason. And we would say, okay, Banquet, which is a separate for-profit company that all happens to attend this church, wants to invest in you. But we want you to go through the training. We want you to learn how to do Jesus really well. And if it's a good fit for you, we cheer you on starting your own thing, and you become part of the Banquet family, if you will, part of the Banquet ecosystem. And so we'll just probably too nitty gritty here, but it depends on the deal. But we might do hey, we'll pay for it all, and you just go do wine, bro, but do it really well and give Jesus credit and be a part of our be a part of our larger family. And the church that gathers on Sunday is not what I'm talking about. That's part of it. I'm talking about the whole. And after we're paid back from whatever we funded you for, it's yours, or maybe we keep 10% as the business, the for-profit, or maybe we keep 20% and we stay involved. So that's more of the business side of it. But Banquet, for clarity, is a for-profit incubator for kingdom ecosystems. So we're saying that we believe the church can get outside of the 501c3 market and embody itself in any domain and be the church. So I'll take an executive at a business and say, hey, what happens if I know this is a business and there is transaction there, but there's also relationship. I want you to focus on ministering to the relationship side of this as much. So be a shepherd as much as you are a CEO, because the storm's coming and we need shelters in the storm. Because the current church is it's like a cruise ship and everybody keeps getting on it. And I'm saying, no, we need lifeboats. We need smaller vessels. And so what are the tables? What are the vessels that already exist in the world? And can we put shepherds, artists, and entrepreneurs in those spaces and turn the lights back on? It's blurry, I know. And we're talking to Exponential this year coming up on it because they're asking questions about it, and we're talking about this in other places too, because I think a lot of people are starting to go, oh, I don't have to do church the normal way. I can do it, in these other ways. Yeah. So I was just with a guy that owns 3 restaurants, and when they throw their Christmas parties, all the families get together, they pray, they do worship, they eat a meal together, and then their teams, like, hey, you're the manager of this team, but that's also their small group and their families. And they're just doing it,
You've essentially rethought church planning.
Yeah.
I mean,
correct.
you're reproducing more communities, but you're not doing it through the traditional nonprofit, we're going to create a space for a church type thing.
Yes. Yeah, you're quick to catch that. And that was the genesis, was we were trying to plant churches the normal way, and nobody would give us money. All the wells had dried up. All the generosity had gone out the door, even from denominations and from planting networks. I don't know if you've noticed this. The language has shifted. Now, some still have big bucks, but the folks we were working with didn't. And then we went to the marketplace, and they're like, oh, yeah, I want to help plant a church, but I want to be a part of it. And a light bulb went on. So I was sitting with he was a barber, and he wanted to become a church planter. I said, hold on. How about we help you open a barber shop and plant a church at the same time? And boom, now he's funding his salary, and he's still able to raise money. So he can do both now, right? Another guy in San Francisco, coffee beans, and again, a sanctuary. He's doing both. And so that's how we're helping planners kind of do this in other places. So
that's super cool. You have all sorts of things that you're working on. As I was looking through your portfolio, you're an executive director of the Surge Network, which was co-started by a guy named Tyler Johnson, who we had on the podcast episode 2, all the way back when this podcast was a little baby, trying to figure out what the hell we were doing with Tyler Johnson. He was nice enough to be on it. And so you're a part of this now. And I don't know a ton about the Surge Network, but from what I can gather from my vantage point, it seems like this is bringing together a lot of churches with a variety of theologies, again, from kind of just the outset. I'd love to hear more about how does the work that you're doing fit in with that, and how do you see this partnership with other churches?
Yeah, I connected with the Surge Network and Tyler Johnson back in the day when I was planting, because I needed friends that were in the missional space, and they were there. And at that time, they were exclusively in a Reformed missional space. And over time, they really started to awaken to, I think, what God's Spirit was doing, was saying, hey, I want you to love my whole church, not just the part that looks like you. And that resonated deeply for me. And so I really started to cheerlead along with Danae and a few other voices there. How do we become a truly ecumenical church that reflects the bride of Christ, not just our corner of the sandbox, and work together? It's not easy. It's difficult. And people have seen over the years, we've had a lot of bumps and bruises because of it. But we're committed to it. No matter how messy it gets, because that's what's necessary to fulfill the John 17 prayer. And so, yeah, all we do at Surge is we go, where do we see Jesus in all the streams, and how do we pour water on them? How do we partner and encourage those working with refugees, or those working in worship networks, or those working in neighboring projects, or, pick your thing, and we get behind it. And then Surge also has a training discipleship curriculum that is probably most well known for, that various churches throughout the valley and now around the world use to do discipleship training. And so we do a few things, and it's really fun to be a part of it. And the reason why I'm still a part of it is because I want to experience the fullness of Jesus, not just the Anabaptist Jesus. Who is my favorite Jesus, but I know that he's bigger. So I got to get some charismatic in me every now and then. I got to get some of that reformed, as much as I don't love it. I got to have a little bit of all of that if I want to encounter the God that's at work in the city. The city church is the church. The local church is an expression of that city church. And if the people in Phoenix knew the Church of Jesus, they would be talking about all the Christians that represent that. And so how do we work on that reputation, not just Axiom or Redemption or pick your spot?
Yeah.
So it's fun. And it's connected me to a lot of cool folks, including Tyler, which, by the way, I saw that episode. You guys talked a lot about baseball, which was great. And I had just hung out with him the day before you were with him. And we were talking about this kingdom ecosystem banquet stuff then, because he was starting to think about some of this stuff as well. So he actually helped us even kind of process, is our language making sense? Is this helpful? And he's been such a gift to working with us on that. So
he's such a cool guy. He's very brilliant.
Very brilliant. Yeah.
So, Gavin, you're on the front lines of ministry in so many creative ways, and I think a lot of people are going to resonate with just your heart and your posture to all of this. You're also, as a good Anabaptist, you are working against the Christian nationalism that is taking root all around us, gaining traction in our culture. In light of that, one of the things that I think we should spend more time on than we do, what are you seeing that gives you hope? Because I get asked this often by people, like, this feels heavy, I'm despairing. But as someone who is doing so much kingdom work in these creative ways, what are you seeing? What are some glimpses of hope that listeners can cling to?
Yeah, I like that part of the question. Here's something that's given me a lot of hope is actually I've been hearing recently a lot of warnings and people coming out against third waysism in Christian circles, which you would think would cause me, be the opposite of hope. But actually I'm going, it's interesting that these voices that are starting to get really loud are starting to attack anything third way or, Anabaptist, because they're recognizing that there's something here that people are beginning to gravitate towards. And in the early stages of third waysism, it can be unhealthy and it can err towards privileged things, and it can, all of that can be there. But at its healthiest expressions, Anabaptism will, again, it's going to orbit around, it's going to care about what we orbit around, which is Jesus. It doesn't care how close you are. Like you could be Mars and Earth, or you could be Pluto out here. As long as you're orbiting around Jesus, that's what we're trying to get at. And proximity is less important. Now, we hope that the gravitational pull will come in. But so I'm seeing that as a sign of hope, that people are starting to kind of like take their swings at some of the emerging third ways and language, not left, not right, Jesus, that kind of stuff. Which again, as slogans alone aren't enough. We need more than that. We have to actually help people understand what it means to walk in that. So I'm hopeful about that. I also think people are just getting fatigued with the culture wars, just like they did with Iraq and picture other places. And so what I've tried to say is, okay, what if you could be a medic in the battlefield instead, in the midst of the culture wars? So your goal there is not to fight the war; it is to tend to the wounded. And can you see yourself doing that? And what would be the spaces that you would begin to work it out? And people are really resonating with that imagery and ideas and thinking about it for themselves. So, hey, we can't even have a dinner with mom and dad without things blowing up. Okay. So your job there is not to correct or get them to agree, although it's frustrating to hear them talk the way they do about people in those positions. What does it look like to tend to the wound? And so that's bringing me some hope. Outside of that, I would say things are still, Jen, if I'm just honest, things are still feel a little dim for me on that front. And I say that as a pastor who battle after battle, see people dip out or leave or get frustrated. Or here's what the first sign that happens. It's not that they disassociate, they distance themselves. And they do it by unfollowing, or they do it by not answering your phone. If you catch them, they'll still be kind, right? And what we're doing in that space is we're actually pouring water on a spirit. We're pouring water on something really unhealthy. And I think that's what evil wants most, is to pull people into its gravity. And I've talked a little bit about this before. And we have to be really cautious. It's a two-headed snake. Sorry, y'all. It's left or right. One's good cop, one's bad cop, but they're both cops. One's worried about physical strength, the other's worried about moral strength. And I would just say, no, there's an alternative that is both strong and heart, mind, and body, and it wages a better path. But it doesn't, and that's why it's a narrow road. It not a lot of people are on it, but I do think so. I'm probably talking too much on this, but does that make sense? Am I off?
Well, what gives you hope is a very subjective, personal question, right? I just think, you look around, and if you're paying attention, it doesn't look good. It is very dim. And so I look at people like, I don't have optimism about any of this stuff. But as a follower of Jesus, I live in hope. And, I use that phrase a lot. Like, we live in hope, because it's like almost as a reminder to me, as a reminder to you, like, we choose hope, not because the situation looks great, not because I believe I have the skill to do something brilliant, because I believe in the redemption of Jesus. Like, I believe that Jesus can do things that, that I would hope in the deepest part of me could happen. I still believe Jesus could do that. That's why we live in hope. But how we see that, I think, is very subjective and depends on where we're looking and what we're noticing.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll just name that you made me think of that for me is pretty hopeful is what I found over the last 10 years is that a lot of the people that left Axiom, deconstructed, fell away, whatever it was, fell into the traps even of some of the culture war stuff. What ended up happening was not an exodus, it was a sending. That God actually put them out in places that they were being held back from because of their relationship with the church. And it took time, but what I'm recognizing as they reemerge is that they still love Jesus, but now they've got some friends with them that didn't know Jesus before. That makes me really hopeful, because these aren't trained missionaries, but God sent them anyways. And so I do think that there is something in all that, and so when the church falls apart, in our systems, in our attendances, it's a scattering that sometimes is happening also. And that gives me a lot of hope, because you end up throwing a torch out into the night, and I think that's needed. So
yeah, I love that. All right, we're going to transition to asking you our questions that we get to ask each guest. We compare your answers to everyone else, and we'll see where you take it. We'll start with a wine one. So if I ask you, Gavin, what is the best moment you can think of that you've ever had a glass of wine? I know, admittedly, you're not a huge wino, but you've had a glass, you're like, wow, that was the best I've ever had. Is there one memory in particular? Is it a specific bottle, specific location, who you were with? What comes to your mind of the best moment drinking wine?
Yeah. So I'm just going to go with what came up first, but I was hiking with some camping with some guy friends. This is probably 12 years ago. And we'd all had a few too many. We ran out of all the beer, and all that's left was a boxed wine.
Oh, no.
And we were sitting around the fire, and we decided that we wanted to just spend some time sharing stuff with each other that we'd never shared before. We had some liquid courage. For sure we did. But the rule was that only the person with the wine box could share their secret or their truth. And so we passed the wine box around, and we all confessed and shared things. Some silly, some really serious. I mean, some of the guys took this as like, they're like, oh, when else am I going to get this kind of safety? So I look back on that silly box wine in the woods with the guys moment as like a true sacred moment that I'll forever cherish from a tasting wine standpoint. But other than that, I just like that. 15 years ago, you couldn't even have wine with leaders in the church. You know what I mean? And that paradigm has completely fallen apart, which thank God that we
as
don't
this
have to go
podcast has shown.
Yeah. I don't have to go to church plant conferences anymore and hide my alcohol. It's like I can talk about it, and I own a bar and call it good. So anyways.
That's amazing. All right. Which member of church history would you trust to pick a bottle of wine for you, and who would you not trust, and why?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. And as soon as I answer it, I'm going to think of a better response. But I'm going to attempt here anyways. I think, gosh, I'm gonna go with. I'm torn between Spurgeon, although I don't really want his company. But I know that the guy defended alcohol and St. John Climacus. And I think I'm going to land with John Climacus, although I think he later ended up forcing his guys to abstain from it at some point. But the reason why, for Spurgeon, because I think he liked his alcohol, and at the end of the day, I want to have a drink with somebody that can enjoy it. It's not like a taboo. And then Climacus, I think I would pick because that guy could see through a person like anybody. And so if he could choose my wine, I bet he would choose it pretty well.
Okay, who do you not trust to choose you a bottle?
I don't trust any church planter from the year 1980 to 1995. If you planted in that era, I'm sorry. I trust you not with my alcohol.
That's amazing.
And that's all I got to say about that.
Nice. You know the famous quote about Spurgeon, because he'd also probably have you smoke a cigar with him too.
Perfect. And actually, this is where I think wine makes sense. Is wine is more intimate, and it forces you to slow down, where other beverages are more speed drinking typically. And so if you open a bottle with somebody, you're going to have a couple hours of it. I mean, you know all this, but that resonates with me. So if you try to have a bottle of whiskey with your friends, you might not survive the night.
A lot of truths will be shared, and then you'll pass out.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. What is something you used to believe that it turned out later you were wrong about?
Yeah. Oh man, everything. Yeah, I honestly, I think my entire theological paradigm had to shift at some point. So hell, I used to believe in, literal hell. I don't. I believe in hell. I believe there is such a thing as hell, but I don't believe in hell in the way the traditional sense. I think that's probably so common for so many of us, but it was wrestling with that issue actually that sort of gave me permission to begin to go, all right, I need to revisit Jesus and get really serious about my faith, because I'd just been blindly believing this kind of crazy talk without question. And that's okay. That was the immaturity of my faith. But once I let that one go, which was less about me being convinced in my mind and more about the social pressure and the worry of relationship.
Yeah.
Man, has Jesus and the Gospels and theology been a lot of fun. But yeah, I used to hold a more traditional view. I remember preaching on the option of annihilationism and then the more, C.S. Lewis version and some of the other ideas a few years back. And I thought people were going to leave freaked out, but most people were like, oh, I'm so glad that you just kind of gave us permission to land where we land and to not be sure about it. Like, how do we have such declarations on this that are largely inappropriate? And I would just say, I actually think the enemy was probably behind that kind of certitude in regards to hell itself.
Yeah, I've talked about before on the podcast, but I think annihilationism is the gateway drug to get to the real deal.
That or Dallas Willard.
For me, it was David Bentley Hart kicked me over the edge.
Oh, well, that's a bigger drug, dude.
That's a bigger.
That's funny. I do like
he is the hard stuff for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, annihilationism. Yeah, absolutely was like wait a second. I need to think about this for a minute. But yeah, in general, hell is actually something we all know and have experienced in some regard. And it doesn't take, who hasn't wept or gnashed their teeth? Who hasn't felt like they couldn't get out of a pit? And so, in a way, I think we've all been there already. And so.
Feels a lot like reading the news right now.
Yeah, it really is. Really is.
On that note, what do you see as the main issues facing Christianity in America today?
Unhealthy Christian nationalism, I'll say that, which I want to say that's like all Christian nationalism, but I know that there are softer expressions that hold a lot of space and generosity and room in it, but I think that is a sincere issue. And we've talked about that. I think gospel centralism is also an issue. And what I mean by that is we need to be centered on Jesus, and that's different than being centered on the gospel. And I'm not trying to put, those are not against each other. So don't hear that. But when the gospel-centered ideas tend to lean towards a Christianity that's void of engaging the world, because it's mostly interested in conversion and those kind of things, even if it has good justice theology or whatever. And versus a Jesus-centered theology will give you a gospel that embodies what Paul says, it embodies the kingdom and its fullness. And so I think that's a subtle issue, but it's a real one that church pastors and leaders sort of unknowingly are prepping up, if you will. And then I think another one is we've lost that. I think pastors are largely off, and I don't just mean theologically. I mean we have lost our way as pastors. We've modeled ourselves after theologians and not Jesus. We preach a good Bible, but we cannot embody Christ. And we speak, but we don't listen. We platform, but we can't be present with our church without crawling out of our skin. There's so many pastors that are completely out of line, and their commitment to shepherding and to being Jesus-centered. I don't want you to just preach Jesus. I want you to sound like him. So when you're preaching, maybe you could yell less, and I want you to carry this easy yoke. And so the posture and presence of pastors is way off guard. Some of the words are good still, but that's just it. The church has been really good at, in the transcendental language, stewarding the truth, but not very good at beauty or goodness. And we need to embody all of that. And so those are a couple of the issues I think facing us. I know there are more. But I actually am really curious. I hope you share one or two that you think is an issue. I'd love to know what's on your mind.
Oh man, I think the Christian nationalism one is probably the most significant. Where I think I just recently wrote a blog post about I saw this whole illustration of people putting sawdust into Rice Krispie treats, and they are putting it in different percentages to see at what point did people notice. And
I read this. Yeah,
I thought it was so. Yeah, I thought it was so fascinating. Of like at 15% sawdust, people knew the Rice Krispie treat texture was off, but the flavor tasted the same to them, and they couldn't tell you it was sawdust. At 33%, they knew something was wrong, but they couldn't tell you it was sawdust.
Yeah.
And I literally I'm like watching this video, and I'm just like, there's no way that could be true. And then it's not till you get to 50% that they go that something is just so wrong. Like, we're not going to eat this. And, so that it made me think of like, this is Christian nationalism, where it starts out really looking like Jesus. It looks like Christianity, but then it just starts to take these things and starts to add in this other flavor that then I would say completely hijacks the host, right? So it was interesting to hear you say you made room for like a Christian nationalism light, or however you referenced it, or a softer version.
Bud Light. Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that. I haven't seen a softer version. I don't know if there is a soft version of it. I think it's all literally demonic. It's anti-Jesus. It is the opposite of the gospel. And, to use Greg Boyd's terms, it is hijacking a power over people as the main, mechanism to get anything done, which is not the gospel. So I see that as the biggest problem, because I would say I don't think the majority of Christians realize it. And that was my whole blog post, was like, I think they are eating a product, and it's like, hey, do you know you have 33% sawdust in that? And it's like, no, I don't have, this is the real deal. And so it's not like they decided, hey, I want to abandon Jesus because I'm an evil person. These are great people. I just think they don't realize. And to me, that's where I really have a heart to, like, how do we prophetically call it out, but also help people in restoration to what is actually of Jesus.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you. I think you're using the right language. I recently wrote on this that what America needs is an exorcism.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't want to sell it any short of that, because I actually think there's an egregore, there's a disembodied spirit thought form. It works like Reddit. The more you fuel it, the more, like, further up the post you go. And it's fueled and powered by so many sources, and the church is one of those main sources. It is. And so we have been really interested in trying to do a little bit more study ourselves on the exorcism and deliverance, and specifically in regards to this, because it feels like people aren't aware. They're actually being apologetics for the movement, and it's pretty. I mean, you're already saying it's pretty frightening. So that's what I think, and I couldn't agree more. I think what I mean by soft nationalism is the relative that just loves their country and are grateful for it. It's like, okay, like I'm not picking a fight with that, but embedded in that is a potential trap as well, and that's how nationalism works. I like Greg Boyle reference.
I'll tease you out that point a little bit, because I think I have a theory. I don't think I've shared this anywhere publicly. My wife and I talk about this all the time.
Go. I want to.
So here we go. I'm gonna drop this right here. I think there's two reasons you get into this, and they have radically different results depending on which reason you got into it. Okay, so the two reasons are this, and I think you might actually have room for this based on what you just said. I think you either get into this based on fear or based on greed. Those are my two reasons. Fear is, hey, I'm afraid of, these outside forces. I'm afraid of what I've heard about immigrants. I'm afraid of all this. And so they get into it not because they want to dominate over anybody, because they have bought the lie that everyone's out to get them, right? And the othering message. And so I can have empathy for that person, and I have people in my mind, even as I say this, that I would say, you got pitched this in fear, and it made sense to you, and it tapped into the fears that you have. And so this became a framework in which you alleviated those fears, right? So if I go along with this, I'm not quite as afraid. There's something to do with my fear. But the second group gets into this because of greed. And greed can be financial, meaning, hey, this guy is going to be, my ticket to have more, to dominate more, to be, to thrive, whatever version. But greed can also be, I want my way over other people. I want my preferences over other people's preferences. I want the things that I value to be everybody's values. And I would say all of that is greed. And I would say that, to me, is a much darker, sinister version of this that is much harder for me to have empathy for, which I still try because I follow Jesus. But it's that one, like, takes a lot of work. Whereas someone who I recognize, oh, you got into this over fear, it's much easier for me to be empathetic with that person. What do you think about those two?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't disagree, or couldn't agree more. I think absolutely, fear and greed are in a sense, it's another. Those are like other words for the demonic. They enslave us, and so yes, if I were to add one more, it would be pride, and I would just say that it's like, pride got angels kicked out of heaven, then humility, hopefully, is what we can use against this, and so, yeah, 100%. And I know people like that, in my own family, I've wrestled with these issues. Oh, this is going to cost me. I own these businesses, and having this posture, people are going to automatically associate with left or right. And I'm trying to uphold an alternative altogether and say I'm not interested in either of those. I think there's a better way, period. So yeah, and this continues to come, and the forcefulness of it, this particular Christian nationalism, to me demonstrates a dark, we're in a crusade season of sorts, and it'll probably get a little bit uglier in some regards, and it's to be determined what that will look like. But this is why deliverance is so in front of us right now, because we're trying to think through how do we actually engage this. Jesus knew how to do it, so we could probably figure this out.
Well, and what I would say is what's needed right now is the prophetic voice, which is not, I think people misunderstand. It's not, hey, I'm going to tell you the future. It's, I'm going to speak truth to power. I'm going to speak truth to what needs to be spoken. And when you have, a demonic stronghold, you need the prophetic voice to call it out and be like, whoa, this is not what you think it is. We need to repent. We need to rethink this. We need to grieve what we've allowed. And the problem with that, as you know, is if you take the prophetic posture, it always comes at a price. It will cost you. And, it cost me a lead pastor job in 2020 when I decided to take a prophetic stand. And, I haven't gone back into a lead pastor role for that reason of I want to have the ability to use my voice prophetically and not be in the same situation I was in. And I've even noticed, like, my wife, who's not in ministry, she's in real estate, but as I have said some things and then she has said some things publicly, we've noticed she's lost clients over that. And so you realize, like, oh, it's in everybody's best interest to shut up and go along with it. But that's how it continues to grow. And until we're willing to say, no, I'm going to be that friction against it at some level, right? Whatever makes sense to you, you have to be willing to also accept the fallout of that.
Yeah. Yeah. My only caveat I want to add to that, not take away, because I completely agree, is I want to see equal to the prophetic. I want to see apostolic work in that direction. And so that we start creating spaces and systems that you can actually do this new work out of. And so we're not just critiquing, but we're offering options as well. And the problem, though, is the prophetic is like blowing the straw, and the apostolic is sucking it. So they don't always work well together. But if we can figure out how to get the apostolic and prophetic to work together, I think we're going to create a lot more sanctuary, shelter in the storm, and good soil for a new life. I'm not ready to lead that charge. If you want to be the prophetic, I'll be the apostolic.
There we go. Let's go.
We'll figure it out one vineyard at a time.
We started it on this podcast right here, everybody. This is where we traced it back. That's amazing.
Man. Yeah.
All right. What's something blowing your mind right now, Gavin? What's something you're learning?
Oh, man. Gosh, I feel like I'm still probably doing more unlearning than learning, but something blowing my mind. I'm a big fan of the practice of mystery, and so I really like to keep Bigfoot and all the things that come along with that in my peripheral. And so I've been a long time student studier of all things cryptozoology, whatever. And I think a lot of the stuff going on in the world right now with that is fascinating, and it's creating a lot of, actually what I'm finding is it's creating a lot of energy for people to talk about God again. Sadly, the fundamentalists are picking this stuff up more than most, but I wish everybody would give it a little bit of attention, because there's something to be said about each historical season where the weird comes out. You look back in church history, or even just history, the witch trials, pick your time. The weird usually follows reformations of some kind. And so the printing press produced a whole slew of new ideas and the plane, and now with AI and the internet and all that, we have a new world of weird emerging, and Christian history has good language for this, and so does conspiracy theorists. And I don't want those two to get confused. So this is an area of interest for me right now that I'm studying and paying attention to.
Dude, that's a hell of a phrase. Weird follows reformations.
Yeah.
I'll have to think about that for a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's because there's an outpouring of some kind, and it's usually one of intelligence, and we sadly will our early interpretations of things are never right, which was the good critique of the Catholics with the Reformation, but ultimately we proved out some things. But this seems true in any new mass of knowledge. We get real excited with an idea and we run with it, and then time will bear itself out, right? So, yeah, weird, all sorts of weird going on in the world right now, brother, and it's fun to watch. So,
that's very Portland of you. I'm so proud.
Thank you. Yeah, Portland is the prophetic of weird.
That's why I love Portland.
So, yeah.
All right, what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Yep, I would say there's a few. I think we have to abandon ship on our financial model for the church and as a whole.
There's a hot take for you.
Yeah. So yes, it's still working for mega churches. That means it's not working for the church, because mega churches aren't working. And so I really think that God is trying to turn a page with us, and we're not doing a very good job of listening because of our institutional bias. And I think institutions and religions are good, they're trellises, all of that. But we've yet to sort of find that optimal equivalence. And so I'm really spending a lot of time trying to think through what is a paradigm that's healthier. Some people say, well, it's the co-vocational or bivocational. But when I meet people that are deep in those spaces, they're bumping into the same problems from different angles. And so that's a problem I'm trying to think through. Now, I'm working with some Christian accounting spaces that are trying to think about this. We have a new thing we're working on for like software that we think can help churches with this. This is a church problem, but it goes deeper than just money. It's like space, legal things. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. That's what came to mind anyways.
Oh, I like it. That's good.
Yeah.
What's something you're excited about right now?
I was getting excited about the new quarterback for the Cardinals for a hot second, but I'm not sure I am anymore.
Okay, so I don't follow football all that close. Aren't the Cardinals doing horribly bad this season?
Yeah, no, they are, but then they got the new guy in, and he was looking pretty good for a second there, and then not so much. And actually, I just want Arizona to have a team again. So I'm really telling you what I want to be excited about, but maybe I'm not.
These are hopes for excitement at some point.
Yeah, I've got hopes for excitement. I don't currently have it. Not in that world. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited about the season of life I'm in. All my kids are at the ripe age of play, and for a long time as dad, I really wrestled with engagement and presence in a way that was integrous. It wasn't duty. It wasn't just me doing it because, like, I heard a lot of guys say, "You got to do this because you're supposed to." I'm like, yes, but I want to do it because I want to. And what I'm wrestling with is there's a part of me that's struggling with that desire. And I feel internally a huge shift of desire towards my family, towards my kids in a way that it wasn't bad. It wasn't spoiled before. It's just more. It's a stronger pulse, and that's exciting to me because that's felt like a long battle, long struggle to be a good husband and good dad. and not just a good pastor.
Yeah.
No, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So my kids want to hang out with me, so that's exciting. So I must be doing something right.
That's a great problem. We joke, we have a 16-year-old, and when I was that age and I had a vehicle, I was never home. I was always out and driving and hanging with my friends, and he's always here. If he's not at work, he's here. And we joke like, dude, go live your life. But at the same time, we're like, well, I'm glad he likes to be here. He clearly likes it here and feels safe here. And so I don't know. It's a weird desire as a parent of like, I want you to like us and we want to be there for you. But man, you can never tell if you're doing it right. And then, you see how they grow up and you figure out the things you messed them up with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I moved out the day I turned 18, and I didn't realize then that I, was so ready to exit, and now I'm thinking as I watch my kids get older, I'm like, oh gosh, they don't have to go right away,
Yeah.
Obviously I'll be stoked for them as they get on their own feet, but I do think about that.
Love it. All right, Gavin, we've covered a lot of topics. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap this up? That this episode would not be complete if we didn't address it.
No, I feel like I talked a whole bunch in a lot of different directions, and I'm just, dude, thanks for hanging with me and giving me some space. I'm stoked that you had Tyler on recently. I didn't even know you guys were in the same world or universe on a hill. And is that episode out there yet?
I was on his podcast, so he was not on mine.
You were on. Okay, that's what it was. I just saw the blurb about it. So
the Tyler Hill podcast. Shout out to Tyler.
Yeah, there's another spiritual director popping up, which not a lot of them have ever had a voice. And
How do you know Tyler?
I just know him from the spiritual direction spaces. I did my training years ago, and somebody had said, hey, you should connect with this guy, Tyler. And actually, we haven't connected yet, but I was sort of paying attention and following stuff and just really appreciating his posture of just really loving everybody and caring a lot about helping people with their challenges, obstacles, if you will. So he has in the spiritual direction language, it's the cure and the care. And I actually think he's probably more cure than care. And so I've enjoyed following. So, yeah, I'm just a fan. We're not friends. So.
All right, Gavin, how do people, I'll put the links to the different things that you're working on, but how do people connect with you if they're like, hey, this is super intriguing, they want to start their own church, bar, whatever? Like, how do they connect to find more about you?
Yep. You can just find me on Instagram, honestly. That's probably just that way you message me and you get me. If you go to the other places, you might get an admin or somebody else. And so it's just the Reverend Gavin. At least I think that's what it is.
I'll put your Instagram link in.
You can message me directly there. Otherwise, Project Banquet's website, certainly there's a link there. But yeah, connection would be the goal, guys. As I said at the beginning, everything I do, I want to do in relationship. And so I prefer that we got connected and, so that'd be awesome.
Well, Gavin, it has been a delight to catch up with you and to see how our journeys continue to connect and to overlap. And I love the creativity. I love the way you are embodying the gospel, the way you're doing it in community. You're making Anabaptists look cool again. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for all your work.
We need more Anabaptist churches in the Valley. So when you're ready to launch yours, I'm your first financial donor, and I'll fundraise. And heck, you don't even have to start a Sunday gathering. You can just, do it in the living room. But we need it.
Love it. Dude, thank you so much for being on the episode with us.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this very creative conversation that went all over the map. And we will see you on the next episode of Cabernet and Pray.